The University of the Free State has honored acclaimed business leader, a former official in President Nelson Mandela's government, and a former Constitutional Court justice. It's as the country marks 27 years since the first democratic elections in South Africa. For more on this, we're joined by business leader Dr. Sipho Pitjana. We're expecting him to join the conversation a little later, and former Constitutional Court Justice Dr. Zak Yacoob. Justice Yacoob, good evening, and thank you so much for your time tonight.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having us. It's a pleasure being with you.
How are you feeling about this honor from the University of the Free State?
Sorry?
So I was just asking you, in terms of the honor that is coming through from the University of the Free State, how do you feel about it?
I feel very honored about it. I think it's very important to recognize these contributions. But I feel honored not for myself. I really feel honored because it is an acknowledgement of the thousands and thousands of people who were imprisoned and tortured, millions and millions of people who were moved, thousands of people who have made sacrifices, thousands of people who have died. So many people have suffered for the cause that in some way one thinks that one does not deserve it oneself. But in the end, it is very important to accept the honor and accept it, recognizing that your contribution and what you've been able to do would have been worthless and nothing if you had not been helped by the hard work and sacrifice and serious trouble which befell many, many, many people in the struggle.
It's an important thing to acknowledge, because many people today feel disconnected from our history, because when they look at who is celebrated, they don't always see the names of their grandmothers and their grandfathers, and yet some ordinary South Africans really paid a very heavy price to be where we are today.
Absolutely right, and that is the most important thing. People like me were lucky. We did what we had to do, and somehow, apart from a bit of detention here and there, we survived. I can say that I was never tortured, and that is a wonderful thing. I am quite sure that, understanding myself as I do, I would not have been able to stand a second's torture. But I have been very lucky, and I accept with a sense of complete pleasure and complete appreciation of all those who have gone before.
Dr. Pitjana, thanks for joining the conversation, and perhaps your own reflections on the University of the Free State and this gesture that has been made to honor you.
Let me say hello to Sipho first. Hello. Hello, Sipho.
Thank you very much. And
how are you?
Very well.
Oh, good. Now that we
and congratulations to you.
Good evening. Wonderful, wonderful to have graduated together, yes.
Indeed. Kathy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
And thank you very much for inviting me. It's a distinct honor to have been awarded this degree by the university. There are many more deserving people, I would have thought, that would be worthier of the honor that has been bestowed on us. I guess through me, they are recognizing them as well.
And let's talk about the fact that this happens as the country is marking, 27 years of being able to have a free and democratic vote. What have been your reflections, maybe perhaps not just throughout today, but just where we are within this period of the country? Dr. Pitjana?
Well, a journey incomplete, a journey full of promise, a great deal of achievement in the course of it. But we're reminded every day, Kathy, that so many people remain homeless, so many remain with the challenge of education. As I comment in my remarks, so many, every year, virtually we start the year with student protests to be educated. And that the promise of the Constitution is that of an education that will be accessible to all. so many who are desperately in need of the promises that are there in the Constitution, an inclusive economy that offers great prospects to all South Africans, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender, and indeed sexual orientation. But that promise remains a mirage to so many South Africans. So even though we have registered some successes, the gap between the promise of the Constitution and where we are remains a very big one.
Justice Yaqub, is there a way of instilling hope to those people that Dr. Pityana is referencing who simply are not reaping the dividends of democracy and are therefore today feeling like they are not free? Because as long as they don't have access to economic freedom, then their lives are stuck. They can't change their circumstances.
I understand that problem completely, because despite the existence of our constitutional order, inequality abounds, poverty abounds, the health system is in a mess, the education system is in a mess, home affairs is in huge trouble, and therefore ultimately we seem to have got now very little right, although I accept that lots of progress has been made. The only way I can put it is that our Constitution can be said to be worth the paper it is written on, only if we accept that it by itself could not achieve democracy, equality, and all those things. The Constitution, if you like, ushered in a new period of our struggle and created the opportunity and provided the foundation for all of us to struggle towards the achievement of that future and to do what we can. It is our constitutional duty to struggle, and to all people who have privilege in society, and in this I include university students, and I salute their struggle. We should all continue to struggle as our constitutional duty to improve the lot of people. And I think the corruption is the biggest cancer which has plagued us. Had it not been for corruption, we would have had more housing, we would have had more equality, we would have had better health and better education. But people have just been plundering, with the result that poor people have suffered considerably. And we have to start the struggle again strongly.
Dr. Pityana, is there a way that we can be instilling hope in South Africa, in South Africans rather, about the promise of what this country can still be, despite the fact that we're not there yet? Because there is a great sense of disillusionment about where we are going and the trajectory that we are on right now.
Well, I think that the instance of the constitutional order creates only opportunities, which we have to use every opportunity we have to push the boundaries to make them a reality. So it's a continued struggle, I say, because it is not for government to deliver this only, but it is for us as a collective nation to push for those boundaries even further. I make this point constantly about one of the critical factors, of course, of meaningful liberation of our people is a full inclusive participation of all in the economy, particularly those previously marginalized. And unless that happens, the freedoms that we talk about will not change the social condition, because our social condition is determined in large measure by our economic positioning in life. Our economic positioning will determine whether we have access to quality healthcare, quality education, etc., etc. And yet the Constitution promises that these things will be equally accessible to all, and the reality is different. So wherever you are, you should be able to have the option to have access to quality social services in society, regardless of your status in life. That's what the promise is. So we have to push the envelope to make sure that that does happen. And I think that The debate that must be had is whether the economic policies and the social policies that we've had since 1994 afford us an opportunity to push those boundaries.
One of the things that is coming up as you're speaking, especially focusing just on the role of the economy, is that as you say this, we are coming off a couple of weeks that have been rather chaotic, especially for corporate South Africa, black business leaders in particular, who have been speaking out about the fact that there's very little transformation in corporate South Africa. And in fact, where there are black good leaders, they are often pushed out, as we have seen in the instance of Daniel Minele. Do you have specific reflections about that, especially as somebody who is a leader in business and who understands the dynamic? Why is there no or very little transformation taking place, at least not at the rate that is representative of the kind of country we live in?
Well, the fact of the matter is that corporate South Africa has a long way to go in terms of realizing the aspirations of an equitable society in all aspects of its being, whether it's at executive level or even at lower levels. Stories abound about the persistence of discrimination, whether it's race or gender discrimination or other forms of discrimination. So it is a contested terrain. We have to continue to use the permissive policy frameworks that have been developed by government to drive that agenda, to push, to ensure that the environment enables participation and full participation, particularly of black people, in all aspects of the corporate environment, including the leadership echelons of that. I'm not going to comment on the specifics of each case because I think that I'm a director, by the way, on the board of ABSA, and I wouldn't want to comment on that matter. The chair of the board has commented on that on behalf of the entirety of the board. Suffice to say that from my perspective, those of us who have been on this journey of transformation would not tolerate hounding out of black leadership from leadership positions on the ground of racial discrimination or gender discrimination for that matter. It's a responsibility we carry. We occupy those positions exactly because the bounds of transformation have been pushed by many of the voices that you'd have heard in these past weeks that are championing and talking to transformation issues. And of course, it is inevitable when, in an environment when you have very few of us in leadership positions, lose those positions for whatever reason, that there will be an outcry because we're so few. So many years since we attained our liberation. The issue, though, is that we must continue to push those boundaries to make sure that we sustainably occupy leadership positions of these corporations.
Justice Jacob, let me wrap up with you. Mr. Pityana is talking about using the Constitution to push the boundaries and to ensure that we do end up with a more equitable society. Are there low-hanging fruits from your perspective? You've worked with the Constitution for a long time. You understand the document well.
I want to say that the court orders and the Constitution is not all. We need to change the hearts and minds of our people. There's intrinsic racism everywhere. Most white people think that they are superior. Most Indian people think that they are superior to African people. Indian people amongst themselves, they feel that dark-colored Indian people are inferior to them. Even among so-called colored people, they regard the straight-haired people they regard themselves, the straight-haired people, as superior. So unless we have a social revolution where everyone begins to understand that our humanity is our basic thing, and that once we empower people, and until and unless we get rid of race, we are going to be in very serious trouble. So I think that apart from court orders, apart from participation in the struggle, we ask everyone to look at themselves, to look at whether they are truly non-racist or non-sexist. You know, I was racist and sexist until I was 25 years old. And it took a long time for me to change my position. It was a struggle to become truly non-racist and truly non-sexist. And I implore everyone to look at themselves and to make sure that they begin to understand each other's humanity and stop being racist. That is the social revolution we need.
Former Constitutional Court Judge Zak Yacoob and business leader Dr. Sipho Pitjana, let me thank you both for your time on News at Prime tonight. When we return, we look at the testimony of former Minerals and Energy Minister Mosebenzi Zwane at the State Capture Inquiry today. You don't want to miss this.